Tam.
Okay, good afternoon now. That was good morning a couple of hours ago. Now it's good afternoon. And welcome back to Belarus. Today I'm going to talk a bit about social exclusion of people with disabilities in my country. The reason why I chose this topic, well, there are two reasons why I chose this topic. Well, first of all, because having economics background, for me it was a challenge to analyze something from more like social pillar, right, of sustainability. And then when I moved to Germany for my studies, one of the first things that I saw was, wow, how many disabled people are there in this country? And immediately after, the other thoughts came to my mind. No, these people have so many opportunities to participate equally in life, and this is amazing. And this is what we back in my home country still have to work on. So that's why I will firstly say just a few words about Belarus and its success and maybe challenges on the way to sustainable human development, and then I will try to briefly explain how can actually we talk or measure social exclusion in Belarus and what the challenges were during preparation of the case studies, and then I will briefly explain how actually are people with physical disabilities or mental disabilities are excluded from all aspects of life in Belarus, and I will touch upon some drivers of social exclusion. So Belarus is a country with population of 9,400,000 people, with a high HDI, high level of human development. It's surrounded by Russia, Ukraine, then Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. And I should say that basically during these 20 years, we are doing pretty well, even in comparison to our neighbors. And the achievements that I would like to highlight is the achievements in sustainable human development. I mean, is the reduction of income poverty, which by the year 2000 was about 40%, and then it reduced to 5.2 in the year 2010. And inequality, it was always pretty small in comparison, especially with the neighboring countries. So the Gini coefficient is about 0.27, and it's reduced slightly during last decade. On the other hand, we still have many challenges, despite the income equality, let's say. We still have gender inequalities, which we've been discussing, so I will not stop here. Another really alarming trend is the increasing number of people with AIDS. As you can see from the slide, during the last decades, the number of people with this disease rose by 18 times. Then we also, as every country, suffering from climate change, and combined with Chernobyl consequences, it has huge impacts on human health, especially in the increasing number of cases of cancer. Then we have, as you heard today in the morning, quite a weak civil society and basically lack of good governance. And the problem of my concern here is social exclusion of different groups of society, and in particular people with disabilities. Well, it was a bit challenging actually to find out what the situation with the people with disability is. How are they excluded? What are the drivers of this exclusion? How can we measure? Because in the social exclusion as such is not in the official discourse yet. And as a consequence, it's not presented in the official statistics. It's not covered. The data that I could find was basically the data on social protection, which I used for my case study. And basically, the statistics from my country is pretty scarce. It's presented very often just for 1 year, and it's hard to track changes during the time. And sometimes it's really unreliable. So I relied on the independent research on that topic and on data social protection, as I said. And also just the conceptual framework that was guiding me is the regional reports on the inclusion in our region produced by DRC, which we all read. So one of the dimensions where people with disabilities are excluded is the economic life. These social protection benefits are quite modest. As you can see, it varies from about €100 to €200, which is below the average salary, and combined with the lack of employment opportunities, it pushes people to the risk of finding themselves in poverty. And a bit more unemployment, on unemployment or lack of employment opportunities available for the people with disabilities. The main causes behind is the inadequate infrastructure was in the city in terms of getting to a working place or getting from out of your house and then working or working somewhere, because the working places are just not equipped for the people with any kind of disabilities. Tax cuts are only provided for the state-owned companies. Tax cuts, I mean, for those companies that employ people with disabilities. So if you work in private sector and you want to employ those people, you will not receive any tax cuts. So it discourages the private sector, I would say. In terms of social services, as I said, social benefits are quite modest, and the so-called benefits in kind are very inflexible and standardized. For example, if the government decided all people with disabilities had to have a pass for a subway, but you, for whatever reason, don't need it, no one will replace it with some other benefit in kind or with money equivalent. You will just not get it. So, but it will be reflected in statistics at the number of benefits provided. So, and then the list of vulnerable groups has not been revisited for last 10 years. So maybe there are more people, so there are some other categories of disabilities that we should consider, but for this reason we don't do it. Then limited access to education and health services. It's very much, the causes for this limited access are very similar to those causes as to the employment opportunities. This is lack of infrastructure and the environment in the health and education institutions is like disabled, unfriendly, I would say. There are often no elevators, you cannot use the bathroom, and these minor things which does not allow you to spend there more than 1 hour or even to get there. And then the lack of study materials for students or pupils that would be adapted for different kinds of disabilities, like physical, I don't know if the person can hear or can see, and all these kind of things. And then again, I want to highlight the limited mobility and inadequate infrastructure in the country, because the high curbs, stairs in transport, no elevators in subway, it all excludes people from getting anywhere to participate, to get access to schools and hospitals and working places and just to parks and lakes. It's not there, and so one of 3 disabled person every 1 out of 3 disabled person experience difficulties when using public transportation. Yeah, and again, from civic participation, basically the weak civil society means that people with disabilities also experience, sometimes they just don't have any, as any person in Belarus, they're reluctant to exercise these rights, to be an active participant of social life, and then I think also important that paternalistic attitude of the state discourage disabled people to fight for their rights even further, because we got used to, during the 8 years of communism and these 20 years of transition, that all your concerns are concerns of the state, first of all. This is the state who provides you, this is the state who takes care of you. And so for me it's important, because I think we have to be the people who have to control our lives, and then the other actors may come. So, as I already said, policies, for example, policies concerning the social protection, they might be considered one of the drivers of social exclusion. And basically, I think that the main preoccupation of our government so far is still economic growth. It's growth-oriented model and not human-oriented model. And I think if we still stick to this perspective, you will not be that much concerned with these vulnerable groups. So, and I think also legacies of the past play a huge role and might also be a driver of social exclusion, because I think people still perceive the people with disabilities as others, as people being less capable of doing something, or they're still somewhere on the edge of the society, and they're invisible. That's also what I said in the beginning. You just cannot see them. You think, okay, there is no problem. So I think it has a huge impact on how then these legacies, they reflect in the policies. Like, we don't really do anything. Well, I think we should really do more. So, and basically this is what I wanted to cover. Thanks for attention.
Floor is yours.
I have just a very short comment. Your presentation reminded me our common history that disabled people or any people different than normal form does not exist in Soviet Union. And it's really pity that such legacies are still being continued.
Yes, I agree. In my case study, I even wrote that these people were not allowed to exist. The system was so perfect, how could you be, some kind of different? And it's still there, it still has its effect.
Just one thing. In the presentation, you said that the state has a very paternalistic, and you argue that we should be independent. But don't you think that certain provisions the state has to make?
Yeah, I think if you look at this from the point of social human development perspective, the state is something that has to provide you with opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, well, I think it should stop. When it really tells you what you need, like you need this fast for subway and that's it, that's a bit too much.
And just are there any NGOs or any civil society actors fighting or putting forth the requirement or the need for bringing up certain bill or legislature, changing the legislation so that it can be disability friendly?
I'm not sure about NGOs. I know that there is the kind of national organization of people with disabilities, and recently they had a small kind of demonstration. The people, that was the people in wheelchairs, they were this transparency saying like, hey, we are here and we want to yes, we want to be equal, but I don't know if they were heard. It's been really recent, maybe after I submitted the case study. Yeah, but definitely, yes, it illustrates that there are concerns with their situation.
I have a question. Olyan, after these 2 weeks of the course, what would you change in your case study? Now, getting more information about it, getting to know where to get statistics, how it relates to the particular situation, whether the Belarus is signing and ratify the convention on people with disabilities. What would you change and what other directions? Because to me, it sounded very general. Actually, listening to you, I would really derive it from the Regional Human Development Report without providing any serious statistical confirmations of what you are saying. So what would you do to improve your case study?
Well, in my case study, I tried to use statistics as much as I could. I didn't put anything here because these are not tables which you can from which you can easily compare data. These are more these figures derived from all kind of legislation or some analysis produced by the state authorities or organization. Well, more statistics would be, of course, really valuable, more than I have in my case study, and I will try to find out more. But so far I haven't. Well, or I found what I found. I don't know. I think some survey would be really a good addition. Yeah, but I have to think about it, how to improve it.
Okay, thank you. It's me.
Okay. So my topic was the role of local government for development, lesson learned from Polish transition experience. And after this summer course, I will change the topic. And I would say that the role of good decentralization for development. And actually I've changed a little bit the structure and so it's not exactly my case study, but I hope it will be easier for you to understand what I meant in my case study. So the structure. First of all, I will tell you shortly about Polish local government after 1989. Then I will present you Polish City Development Index, and then shortly present Katowice as a case study, and I hope in the end I will conclude it somehow. So this is Poland, is in the center of Europe. The area is more than 300,000 kilometers square. Population is less than 40 million. And last year we finally achieved a very high human development. Yes, and actually, because for a long time we actually developing much slower compared to Hungarian, Slovakian, and other countries, neighbor countries. And actually my question was why, and probably because we decentralized our country very quickly. But from 1999 we are divided into 16 regions. We call it województwa, but let's keep regions. But it wasn't always like that. I'm not going to start with Middle Ages, but in general in Middle Ages it was pretty fine. Then in 19th century, because of lack of sovereignty, different regions had different experiences. Between First and Second World War, Poland was decentralized. And then, because of the Soviet Union, of course we are not part of the Soviet Union, but still because of the communism, from 1950 to 1989, there was just no lack of decentralization. And what is very interesting is that actually first reform on local and first local election happened in Poland in 1990. And for example, I just pick up some data. The local government group began its work in February, the 25th of February in 1989. If somebody of you know, the round table was the 6th of February, which actually shows that 3 weeks after. Then the adoption of the Act on Local Self-Government was in March 1990, 1 year after. And then 3 months after we had first free election, local election. So actually for Poland, democracy means decentralization, because everywhere when we were independent and democratic or somehow we were decentralized. But then in 1999, we had second reform on local government, and actually that was consolidation process. It's also very important. But in 1990, gminas were recognized not only as a territory, but also as association of individuals who live in given areas. And local government become responsible for such issues like lands, physical planning, environmental protection, infrastructure, housing, education, healthcare, buildings, public order, safety, and actually everything was put to the local government. And then there were also some instruments which were supposed to protect local government. They should have separate administration, independent bodies with its own executive power, on property, financial independence, protection in courts, and of course any party may not interfere into local government. And there were more of instruments which were supposed to protect local government, but I'm not going to go into details. You have it in the presentation. And this map, just to show you the difference, because I've already talked with some of you about decentralization, and when I ask someone from especially authoritarian country, are you decentralized? And you say, yes, we are. From 1975 to 1998, our country looks exactly the same. So we were divided into 47 regions, but as you already know, that in 1990, a huge reform became. So actually, in the map, nothing has changed. But each region got its own power, yes, and there was huge reform and huge change in the substance of local government. But let's go to the second part. In Poland we have 908 cities. There are only 7 very big cities which have more than 400,000 citizens, and there are a lot of small, even like as you can see, 109 cities with less than 5,500 citizens. This is how they are relocated, and just keep in mind this. This is Warsaw, it's a huge black, this is the population, yes? As you can see, population Warsaw is the biggest. This is Krakow, and this, keep in mind, this is Silesia. Just remember the black area here, this is Wrocław. because we will need it after. In 2011 was published the report on the increase of development index of Polish cities from 2006 to 2005. There are some issues which were taken into consideration, and we have results. As you can see, the biggest cities, they're developing more or less equally, yes? But then we have some differences. Anyway, the highest index achieved Wrocław, Warszawa, Łódź, and Katowice. I'm not going to talk about Katowice because I will keep it for later. But I would like to compare Wrocław, Warszawa, and Łódź with, for example, Białystok, Bydgoszcz, and Lublin. When we take the population, actually those three which achieve the best results have the biggest population, more than 400,000 people, up to a Warsaw of 1,700,000. But general is like 700,000 people. Those which have the smallest index have 300,000 people or 3,500,000 people, which actually shows, oh, you cannot see it, because there were one more line here, I can see it. Anyway, it presents that those which have the less population has also the lower level of development. Those cities with higher population have higher development index. So why is it looks like that? And I try to keep in mind the population and how the population affects the development of the cities. So as you can see, Warsaw, 1,700,000. Then we have Krakow, Wrocław, Łódź, those which are developing the fastest. And then, do you remember the black part here? That's the Silesia. Right now it's not black, it's full of colors, because in Silesia there are a lot of different cities. So which actually shows that some of them are very small, they are only 100,000 people. Some of them, like Katowice, have 300,000 people. And when we take Silesia as a whole region, we see that Katowice is the biggest metropolitan in Poland, even bigger than Warsaw. Has the biggest population in Poland, and also when we take the GDP, it's on the second position after the Warsaw. But when we take just Katowice, you already know that it's developing pretty well according to the report. Also, when we take some kind of data about the pollution of air or water pollution, we decrease it for more than 50%. We also invest a lot of in businesses. And according to one of the magazines in 2012, Katowice, it is said that Katowice is an excellent example of post-industrial economic development and mirrors the rapid change taking place in the whole Poland since 1990s. But in another report that I presented you, it said that but the rate of change is far behind from the potential. Why? Because Katowice is not the only city of the region. Yes, there are a lot of cities which are concentrated in one place. And actually, you cannot see the difference between one and another. Actually, I was born in Chorzów, it's the small one. I live in Siemianowice Śląskie, and I work at the universities in Katowice. And there's one bus stop which is in the middle of all those three cities. So, and when we compare the different cities within this region, and this, just keep in mind that this is the richest metropolis in Poland, and we see huge differences. For example, access to doctor. There are more than 50 doctors in Katowice. When we take my city, Siemianowice Śląskie, there are around 12 doctors per 10,000 people, yes? When we take the housing, which were made by in Katowice, we can see the difference, and compared to Siemianowice Śląskie, it's very small one. When we take unemployment rate, in Katowice unemployment is 2%, in my city it's 12%. The numbers of roads, kilometers, 194, and in Siemianowice just 40 kilometers. So there's huge distance from one city to another, but still we are the richest part in Poland. So now you can imagine how the situation looks like in a small cities, small town, all over the Poland. So going to the conclusion, there is no single solution, but in my opinion, concentralization is the worst solution. Because in general, people know the best what is good for them and what is good for their children. So I think that decentralization is much better solution than the centralization. But then we need to think how to good decentralize our countries. Because the good decentralization is crucial for development. And I think that the Polish decentralization is really good for good big cities with a huge population, but it doesn't really fit and doesn't really work for small cities, which actually are too small and they are not able to manage with the duties that they got. So the role of national government will be to enable local communities to govern their territories. So they should give them enough power, resources, appropriate division. And then when we talk about international level, I think that in the international policy should be also concentrated in supporting national governments within its decentralization reforms. So, thank you.
I have a question. Is decentralization more expensive?
If it's more expensive or not, actually that's another. So I prepared, but I didn't have time to do it. Yes and no. Of course, I think in general democracy is very expensive. Yes. In Poland we have 3 levels of administration. We have like this decentralized administration, this is centralized administration, and then we have election. And we vote for the mayor of the city, then for local council, powiat council, and the regional council. But actually, it's just one election. Yes. So we actually we organizing this once, and then we don't need to. Yeah. So it's not like 3 different elections, and I don't know if it's more expensive or less. Probably it is, but then we can think about the effectiveness and efficiency, how they provide the services. I think it's cheaper because then, anyway, I think that the central administration must get to the region, yes, anyway, so they need to have some representative in the region, otherwise the region will not be developing at all. So it's easier to take someone from the region instead sending them to the region, because we need people in the regions anyway, because it cannot work in another.
I think doing austerity seems expensive.
Yeah, that's right.
My question is about consolidation reform. I'm asking this because in my country we are currently working in consolidation reforms. I told you about that. I want to know what problems were you facing when you were doing these reforms, because now in my country we are like planning and not taking measures because it has many problems, such as most of municipalities simply does not want to be consolidated with others, and others think that they will lose their jobs. How did you deal with this? And another question is about some promotion for involving municipalities to participate in the process.
I think I start with the second one. Municipality will be interested anyway, yes, because they can lose the jobs, yes. So I think they will be interested in this consolidation process, because otherwise they will stop existing and nobody will ask them if they are interested or not, yes.
Yeah, but I mean maybe from central government they may receive some funds. For example, if you are consolidated with others, you will receive more funds. It's a kind of promotion. Did you do something? Because in many countries which have successful consolidation.
I said how it was in Poland. In 1990, I don't know if you know Professor Buzek, Jerzy Buzek, he was the head of European Parliament, yes? Actually, he's from Katowice, originally from the city where I was born. And he was the prime minister who made this reform in 1999. And actually, he did 4 big reforms. And that was the end of his party. Yeah. So he didn't really ask people if we should consolidate or not. There were 3 big reforms that they made, which actually are working until now, and they are pretty fine. But it was not only the end of the cadency, but actually the party who governed in that moment didn't exist anymore.
Okay, so it was done just by law. They decided to do the consolidation.
Yeah, they just consolidate. And of course there were some consultation and for sure it wasn't. And then we still have, look, for example, when we take the regions, we have the region Zachodnie Pomorskie or Warmińsko-Mazurskie. It means that actually Warmia and Mazury, they are two different parts, which don't really like each other. When we take Województwo Śląskie, we have, that's why I said good division, because here are the mountains. So actually that's, we call them like mountains people. This part is the originally Silesian part, and which during when we were not in 19th century, when we didn't have independence, this part was German, and this part was Russian. So actually, it's a huge problem because after Second World War, and this part had autonomy between the First and Second World War. So when they create one huge, and then here's Częstochowa, which is totally different, which actually prefer to be in this region. So when they divided us like that, we had really trouble because, for example, when I live in a city which was bordering with this Russian part, yes? So even today, when we go to the Sosnowiec, like it's a city in our region, I say that I'm going to abroad. And it's very difficult for us to manage sometimes, yes? But today we are thinking to create some kind of Silesia, which will be based on all of the cities, like this Russian part and German part. So it's better for our development. So it's not easy, and consolidation is probably more difficult than decentralization, but sometimes it's necessary, yes, to provide it.
May I have a comment on this? I think it's a little bit more complicated because you had also Austro-Hungarian part.
Oh yeah, that's this part.
Yes.
So actually here was the border of the
It was in Austro-Hungary.
Austro-Hungarian.
Yes, and Krakow.
It's here, it's not Moscow.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the point is, when this reform started, the initial number of proposals was much broader, and there was a big fight between the former heads of the regions, the voivodeships. How many were there?
37.
37.
So can you
And
imagine?
the first draft of this reform, there was an option for 8, option for 12, and this was the least optimal from socioeconomic, infrastructural, and any perspective. But it was only feasible because can you imagine that 37 small, big bosses of their territories and small empires, and suddenly you lose something which is very powerful.
Yeah.
And the difficulties which Poland has now in terms of regional development are largely stemming from these compromises which could not have been avoided. And it also illustrates not just the difficulties in terms of psychological other problems, but also you need to balance very carefully the central level, which is obviously the central government, regional level, and local levels in terms of Gmina and pockets. And the real trick is how to balance responsibilities with resources and decision-making power in terms of taxation, for example, local taxes, and so on. And it's a very dynamic system because if you change one element, it reflects all the others.
But then we also have, because about this border, yes, there are some regulation which, for example, if this gmina, this small part wants to become the part of Województwo Małopolskie,
Which is level of self-government.
yeah, it's a level of self-government. They can they can do the referendum, like the voting, and if they decide to be part of this, then they can just join another region. Yes. So it's still like there are still some movings around the system. So it's not like done one forever. And then there are still some voices that we should divide some regions, or they should consolidate more. For example, those two are very poor. They are the poorest part of Poland. So it's very difficult to keep them, to develop them. And anyway, whole Poland pay for this. And Poland is divided into A and B. A is the former German part, B is the Russian part, which means that it's poorer part. And it's really complicated, but But we need to find a balance. That's, I said, that good decentralization. I think that for example, Switzerland or German, I think they could find some kind of balance. But of course, the decentralization process is being created for a long time.
How long did it take to finish the reform?
I think we'll never finish it.
You said that on 1990, it was 99, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
1999, the reform was implemented.
Yes.
So when you started to do it, when if you like,
I think it
the
was
first stage.
It was in 1980, in 1998, it was the act, and from 1990...
So 1 year.
1 year, yeah. We like fast reforms. But can you imagine what happened in 1990? Because that was like, the country was totally decentralized, and within 3 months, we just decentralized the whole country, and all this, what I said to you, like all these duties just come to this local level. So how difficult it was for municipality to manage to govern, yes, because they had no experience in governing because all power was in Warsaw. So that was the
Did they
biggest
receive
success.
some financial assistance?
For, yeah, like the,
No, I mean after the reform.
probably yes, and there were a lot of trainings and a lot of improvements, and of course it's like, yeah, that was the whole transition actually was a long process, so it's, yeah, that we did it immediately, but of course now we still, but why I presented this? Because I just wanted you to ask, like, we should think about it, actually what is the influence on decentralization on development, and if our countries are good and or well or bad decentralized. Yeah.
It's just a small comment that when you talked about decentralization, it was a very well depicted presentation. We could have, from the very beginning, talked about the kind of decentralization that took place, administrative, finance, fiscal, or that was, it would have made it a little easy, even though you, in the end, did mention about decentralization of power and everything, but in the beginning, if you would have done that, it would have been okay, but it was good.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's... Who's next?
Yes.
By the way, please, all who present and all the other listening, make notes, remember, because this is not the end of the work on these papers. All these comments are important input, so for you in the future.
I will try to follow after the Belarusian study on people with disabilities, because I will also talk about disabled people in Hungary. But my main focus is on the social enterprise, which really relates to the Power Morning presentation. So I made a case study on a social enterprise, which is called Fruit of Care. They try to provide decent jobs for 120 people with disabilities by selling the products, handicraft products done by them. So in my agenda, I will talk about a little bit just to know about people with disabilities in Hungary. Then I will define the social enterprise. Then I will give a short description on Fruit of Care. And I will introduce its business model and its partners. And then I will give a few conclusions. So what about people with disabilities in Hungary? The previous presentation was, I think, really useful. I won't be so deep, but you really have to know that the 5.7% of the Hungarian population is people with disabilities. My statistics is from 2001, because our last census was done at that time. and the National Statistics Office did this research. And what's actually really important regarding people with disabilities and how you get information on them, that in most of the researches and the census, it's a very sensitive data. So you really have to clarify, so it's a very sensitive topic. So usually people answer something different. Then here you can see the ratio of what kind of disabilities people need. And but we have to know that usually they live in smaller cities, in poor regions, which means that they have much less opportunities. Their education level is below the average. Many of them, they study in special schools and then they work in sheltered workshops. I will talk about the sheltered workshops a little bit later. And then 80% of them become inactive job seeker due to the fact that they have very small opportunities. And I will show you a chart also. And the necessary physical conditions are not assured as well. And of course, leads or social exclusion regarding them. Here you can see a chart. It's a comparison between people with disabilities and without disabilities. It regards education, the education level. And I think which is interesting that, for example, those who have finished at least secondary school, it's almost twice more people without disabilities. So you can see that there is a big difference. Here you can see the economic activity of people with and without disabilities. You can see there is a huge difference between employed people without disability and with disabilities. There is a huge, and as I mentioned that the majority of people with disabilities, they are inactive job seekers. So you can see that there is a problem that people are socially excluded. They have difficulties to access to education and to labor market. So it's kind of a perfect case to develop sustainable development. So I think social enterprise can be a good solution for that. And today we've met some definitions. I will give you one certain definition. It is done by an international organization which is called Non-Profit Enterprise Self-Sustainability Team. This is an international organization which tries to help and develop social enterprises in Latin America and in Central and Eastern Europe. I will talk about it a little bit later too. So according to their definition, social enterprises are created to further a social purpose in a financially sustainable way. They apply business principles and practices to achieve social good, and they reinvest their financial returns into the community to further their social purpose, to create employment or other economic and social benefits for marginalized communities. They can be for-profit or non-profit as well, we've already discussed it. And putting it into the Sustainable Development Framework, I'm sure that it's very, very familiar. I think that due to the fact that there are more and more social enterprises which deal with environmental issues, it can facilitate inclusive growth, but also ecosystem services. So let's talk about exactly about Fruit of Care. It's a micro-enterprise which was created in 2011. They have 6 employees. And as I mentioned, that's the two most important features for social enterprise for the social mission and to do it in a financially sustainable way. Their social mission is to provide decent job for these disabled people who live in sheltered workshops. So they work with sheltered workshops. What are these sheltered workshops? In Hungary, there are some institutions which get governmental subsidy where people with disabilities can live and they can work, but the aim of these institutions is not to provide them job, but to rehabilitate them by providing them job. But it's usually they do handicraft things, and also these sheltered workshops try to sell them, but as we will see, there is a much more successful way to sell these handicrafts. So this Fruit of Care tries to sell these premium products. You can see on the picture that they are different type of oils, soaps. There are lots of design products, more than 200 types. So we can see that, yeah, it tries, okay, I can see that it's great. You can't but this part is right here. So yeah, it tries to facilitate inclusive process. So how did this whole thing start? I think it's really important to try to describe, because then some particularities will be visible. Because Fruit of Care was founded by a man who is a designer and who also used to work for the shelter workshops. So he didn't have any business education, but he knew really well how these shelter workshops work and what kind of particularities these disabled people have and what do they need. And in this sense, they knew that they need many times more tolerance to work with, but on the other hand, they can work on a very monotonous thing as well and do very time-consuming things too. So he looked at these sheltered workshops and he realized that even if in these sheltered workshops they produce tiny little gifts, they don't meet the demand of the market. They are not that quality products, they are not developed very well. And that's why this guy started to think that the demand and the supply should meet and these products should be developed. And that's why he started to go to different trainings, for example, done by the previously mentioned organization NEST, to different trainings to get to know the basic principles of business, how to make a business plan, how to try to develop these products. And then when he realized that it's a great idea, he went to the shelter workshop, but they said, no, I'm sorry, we don't want to do this. And that's why he had to create his own social enterprise. However, it took 2 years to establish a framework, to get the contacts, and also to get the requirement of money. Next, that organization, what I mentioned, helped a lot in this whole process. And since 2010, the sale is increasing, but they are not financially independent yet. So, what about this? How this business model works? So, the Fruit of Care tries to create the bridge between the sheltered workshops and the consumers, and it has a supporter, which is this NEST, what I mentioned. But to all of the partners, there are some features which are very important. Toward the sheltered workshops, the CEO of Fruit of Care, as he was working for these sheltered workshops, he knew a lot of things, but there are some features which really affect the relationship. For example, the first thing is working attitude of disabled people. They can work for very long and they can be very good, but on the other hand, their output is really much impacted by their mood and also by their health status. So you can't really say that you can always count on the quality of their product. And they need special and good quality tools and materials. In many cases, Fruit of Care tries to buy these materials to support the sheltered workshops to increase quality, because Fruit of Care's aim is to have quality products because he wants to sell it on the market. It's very important. And what is also a challenge for Fruit of Care, that the sheltered workshops, they don't think on a business way. They sometimes don't see why is it good for them, how can they reduce the cost if they really work with Fruit of Care. So in this sense, sometimes there is a clash of thoughts. And what is on the other side? So Fruit of Care has 4 distribution channels. They have an online web shop. They attend fairs where they meet individuals. Then they have some resellers and they sell their product to companies. So from one hand, towards the sheltered workshops, they need a lot of patience and they have to be very flexible. But the market expects them something very different. Come on, you have to know what is the price, what is the demand of the supply. You have to understand what I'm telling you. Sorry, think on a business way. Be very credible. I want to see that, that product is really done by a person with disability. It's very important. And for many companies quality is crucial, and they just don't care if it was done by a person who's disabled or not. They want that product to be right at time where they need, and then usually these companies give these products as gifts to their employees, for example for Christmas, and they consider this as a corporate social responsible activity. And of course the market absolutely requires professionalism, be there in time, and it's extremely important. And that's why Fruit of Care has to learn the rules of the business world, which is sometimes not that easy if you're coming from the civil society or if you used to be a designer like the CEO was. So what then, who helps in this whole process? What I think is crucial, that there is this non-profit enterprise has a sustainability team. They try to help social enterprises to provide different trainings, mentoring, to help how to make business plan, how to develop the different products, and they also try to find grants and financial support for them. So of course, Nest helped Fruit of Care a lot, because Nest was that organization where the CEO started to go to trainings, and they are still in contact. So it's almost 5 or 4 year long process. And with the help of Nest, Fruit of Care managed to improve the management capacity and the access to the market. And with the help of Nest, Fruit of Care got some grants. For example, there is a Hungarian bank, and Nest is cooperating with this bank, and together they make a competition. So social enterprises can apply, and the best social enterprise will get a huge grant. In 2010, Fruit of Care was the winner, and they won $67,000 American dollars, and it helped a lot to really start the social enterprise. However, what is very important, even if it is a process, after the process or for the end of the process, Nest also wants these social enterprises to be economically sustainable as well. They have a very good idea. I will help you to get through the process, I will support you, but I really want you that by the end be economically sustainable, and I think it's really important. So just to conclude, the main message is that yes, social enterprises can play an important role in involving people with disabilities to the labor market. I think it's a very good example for that, and there are some other examples in our region too, that they have to learn how to handle the lack of business knowledge of the civil partners, mainly if they want to play the role of a bridge between civil society and the private sector, or even if it's the government. That they must learn the rules of the market and the business way of thinking. I think in this case it's particularly important. Then the social enterprises on the way of sustainability need financial support, but without the trainings and mentoring and capacity building, they will need huge challenges. It's very important. And last but not least, to reach sustainable human development, economic independence is crucial in this sense. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questions?
I have a comment. That was a very nice presentation. I learned how a presentation should be, how it should flow. It was very good. At least for me who was generally confused, it was a very good presentation. Thank you.
I have a question. To what extent did you change it, finalize it in the last few days?
The framework, actually, but it's really funny because last year I wanted to apply to this course, but by the end I didn't have the time to do all the materials, but I started to read the documents. And I found social enterprise the first time in these documents. And okay, I'm not saying that it totally changed my life, but kind of.
Why don't you say it? Say it.
Because after that,
We need it on the records to make the next course even better.
yeah, but because after that, I started to work for this Nest, and that's why how I got into, and this whole presentation was done by an interview with the CEO and one of the.
No, I was asking because somehow I see our discussions reflected in this, and I didn't know is it this 2 weeks reflected or it's the courses before. So I'm really happy to see this because actually it illustrates that we are really having some, I don't know, meaningful work here. Thank you.
I think also a couple of people applied in previous years and passed online course. I think you, right?
Yeah.
So how just because previous time you passed only online course but didn't participate in campus, right?
Yeah, I participated last year online. I participated in the whole course and also submitted my case study and the test and also participated in discussions. But I think last year I just didn't know that I must participate in online discussions more. I think the lowest mark for me was from the discussions. Yeah, but this year I did my best.
And you enjoyed it, of course. Okay, thank you very much. Next one. Last, I think. That's it? Oh, yeah, I missed it the first one.
We could run it again for you on YouTube.
Okay, so the last thing which remains